Welcome back once more. This is Sunday edition here on KTN News. If you're just joining us, we're discussing the biggest political stories in this country. Of course, the biggest stories, it's preparations by both sides of the political divide for the repeat presidential election, which NASA says will not go ahead on the 26th of October. But they have their issues that they want ironed out. Raila Odinga is seemingly, from our sources back in the country, will be addressing a rally by the National Super Alliance at Mombasa's Mamangina Drive grounds later this afternoon. Francis Ntomo is keeping an eye on that. We shall be going crossing live to him in the coastal city of Mombasa to tell us what's happening in terms of preparations for that big rally, supposedly by the National Super Alliance. Meanwhile, of course, Raila Odinga's withdrawal from the race is the basis of the big political stories in this country. But in a rejoinder to that, Ekuru Aukot, the Third Way Alliance presidential candidate, is back on the ballot following the orders of the High Court in Kenya. He will be put back on the ballot, and that, of course, has, according to pundits, maybe changed things in the fact that Uhuru Kenyatta will not be alone on that ballot. There is a whole different discussion on whether the rest of the so-called fringe candidates should be included in the repeat presidential election. Let's listen in to Ekuru Aukot responding or reacting to that ruling by the High Court.
An order being and hereby issued compelling the first and second respondents to immediately issue a fresh Gazette notice and or amend the Gazette notice dated 5th September 16 by way of a corrigendum to include the petitioner herein as a presidential candidate for the
We want to relish this moment, enjoy the opportunity being given, and definitely confirm to Kenyans that we shall be in that ballot as it's been ordered by the High Court.
All right, let me start with you, Mutinda. That ruling by the High Court, how much does it change the dynamics of this discussion of who is in, who is out of the ballot of the repeat presidential election?
Of course, initially the interpretation of the 2013 Supreme Court ruling by the IBC was that only the two candidates should be there. And clearly that has now been overtaken by events going by the new ruling by Mativo, which again, according to the understanding of the IBC, has opened the door for all the others to be back on the ballot. I don't think that is not a bad thing, because it's about the rule of law. I'm a proponent of the rule of law. And unless someone goes back to court and challenges that and a new position is given, we should go by that. We should abide by that, because some of these things are the things that, if we are not very careful, actually, we should thank Ekuru Aukot for having gone to court at this pre-election time, because I believe that would have been one of the issues that would have been brought up at the petition stage. So it's good to thrash out whatever issues that are not clear as at now. And if I would actually also urge IBC to go back to the relevant courts to get any clarification, like they did with the issue of whether the chairman can change a comma or can alter any mistakes that they come across. I think there are issues that are not very clear, and instead of waiting for those issues to be brought by a petitioner after we are through with the 26th election, it would be prudent and in the interest of the country for areas that are not clear, for the parties involved to seek clarification from the courts on any issues around this election that are not clear. Because, like I'm saying, if that doesn't happen before the election, it is most likely going to happen after the election. So I welcome that, and I welcome it in the spirit of that it is backed by solid law.
Mheshimiwa,
yes.
The inclusion of Ekuru Aukot on the orders of the High Court, does it shake your belief as NASA in the decision to not participate in the election on the 26th?
Actually, not at all, not at all. But it's okay for court to pursue the justice through which he did, and that is respectful. And I'm happy that the courts are now working in Kenya. But you see, to us, we see it in another way. Maybe President Kenyatta was lonely over there, and now he has got a company, which does not change our stand as a NASA. But let us put it this way. God also needs to be a serious guy. When that ruling was made, he came out and said plainly that he's not going to consider participating because IEBC have not done a few things he wanted. And then all of a sudden, I'm now going to participate. So we read a lot of mischief in this thing, but it does not change our stand of not participating in the 26th election.
All right. Brian.
What I can say is that the Supreme Court of 2013 spoke by giving an advisory opinion,
Yes.
which a court did not find it favorable to him, and he went to seek reprieve from the Supreme Court itself. And Maraga told him that this is an issue of interpretation, go to the relevant court, which other than the presidential election, High Court enjoys the jurisdiction of any other matter outside that, and number one in interpretation of the Constitution. So on the 2013 opinion, it had no legs to stand in law for certain provisions, and that's why the High Court was able to order IBC to include the name of Okot, and in their wisdom, they included all the other candidates, because if the other candidates went to court, they'll face the same thing. So it's within our court's right, it's within IBC right to include their name now and conduct election on the 26th of October. Whether NASA will participate or not, what we are telling them is this: do not try to disrupt the election. Let the polling centers be open. Tell your people to boycott if they have to, but you know, the right to a free and fair election indicates that a voter has a right to choose his leader on a secret ballot, free from intimidation, violence, and everything. So as NASA plan to boycott the election, please tell your supporters and your people not to threaten others who are willing to vote, not to cause violence to harm them, those who are willing to vote. Let the polling station open. If they don't want to vote, let them not come. But don't try to disrupt and then go to the same... You know, I'm wondering when Moko is talking about legitimacy, how will it lack legitimacy? Because some people use violence or intimidation to block the election. Let the polling station be open. Let people go vote. And then we will see.
What's the difference between disrupting an election and boycotting an election?
You know, boycotting is withdrawal in a correct manner and not participating. Disrupting is using an unlawful means to make sure the election does not happen, like blocking polling stations. You see, when Mko was saying is that some people have been intimidated that if you come from this region, don't go to that place. That's illegal, by the way. That's against the law. It's against our right. And you know, every right has a limit.
All right.
So you cannot limit my right.
Yes,
Because
to vote.
NASA is mentioned, let me respond to this. Raila's withdrawal was very clear. It is called de jure. What he's talking about is de facto. And the tone which Jubilee takes, that is what is going to plunge the country. You heard him say, we are not going to allow.
Yes.
Who is we?
Jubilee.
Jubilee, because Jubilee is in the government. But the government is supposed to make an environment where an election becomes an election. This is what people don't get. Election cannot be devoid integrity, fairness, free, and all that goes with it.
All right.
So when you say, hold your horse a bit. When you say we, that is the attitude we are trying to get out from people. Skin off emotions and let's address
Ben,
issues.
can I respond quickly?
You threatened secession here, Mheshimiwa. That is another attitude that you need to
All right,
get rid of.
gentlemen.
Ben, one
gentlemen.
minute.
No,
Ben,
you
yeah.
threatened secession.
Ben,
without
one
mention
minute.
of it.
Let me allow
Ben,
this.
Ben.
Let me allow this to cool down a bit.
No, but this is unfair.
Yes,
It's unfair
no,
to me, Ben.
Just hold on.
You know, he's saying...
Brian,
he's
just
saying-
hold the
Without
don't
emotions.
forget.
Ben.
Don't forget your point. Just hold the thought for about a couple of minutes. Let's bring in somebody else into this discussion a bit as the tempers cool down here in the studio. Let's bring in the Secretary General of the Central Organization of Trade Unions, COTU, Francis Atwoli, to just give us his perspectives on this issue, joining us live from Kisumu. Thank you for joining us, Bona Secretary General, and good morning. But what are your thoughts, basically, first of all, generally, on the current political standoff, so to speak, and what, in your opinion, is the way forward for this country?
You know what I've been saying is that on behalf of about 2.5 million workers that I lead and other Kenyans, is that this country is bigger than any one of us. We must think of the investments, huge investments that have been invested in this country by both our own people and foreigners. And also, this is the basis of provision of employment and even sustaining the meager jobs that we have in this country. So I was saying, whether Jubilee has majority or not, whether NASA is in the position to scuttle elections or not, there must be a dialogue. A dialogue does not mean that whatever comes out, people will have to share, or there would be a nusu mkate business. But people must have a basis on which they agree as a nation that we need to forge ahead, we need to go ahead as a country, and that is where we are. We are appealing to those who are in authority.
Right. And what
we are appealing.
Yes, yes. As you respond to that, what is your view on Raila Odinga's withdrawal from the ballot specifically?
No, issue of withdrawing, me as a person, I didn't support it because it was a tedious debate and a tedious presentation by capable lawyers in the court to make sure that the first election, which were conducted on 8th of August, were annulled. What Raila and his team would have done, and that is NASA, they would have thanked the court to have annulled the elections, went out flat to reorganize themselves, also to look into ways and means of getting more votes than the one they had gotten, and face elections. Because I don't think pulling out will have to help anybody in Kenya. Kenya is a democratic country. What you need to do is to participate in the elections, and if there are some anomalies they were anticipating, they would have addressed that as they organized themselves to face their friends in the Jubilee. So I think pulling out was ill-advised to the side of Mr. Raila, who has been fighting for democracy, fairness, credible and free elections in Kenya for so many years.
Do you think that IEBC should go ahead with the election if Raila Odinga is not on the ballot?
Yeah, that is my stand. Yeah, it was ill-advised. Raila would have gone to the elections, bearing in mind that out of 19 million registered voters, those who turned out on 8th of August, there are only 15 million. And President Uhuru was ahead with 1 million. Whether it was fair or unfair exercise, Raila would have gone ahead and went ahead campaigning to make sure that the 4 million that did not turn up, they turned up to vote. And if they turned up to vote, they turned up in his favor, other than boycotting the elections. Those are not the requirement of democracy. Even if he fears that there will be another malpractices or unfair practice in the forthcoming elections, I think IEBC had learned its own lesson, and they would have not repeated the same. Two, he would have addressed the issue of the new legislations, the amendment in election laws that are coming up in Parliament as he prepares to win the elections. If he would have won the elections, he does away with those amorphous, newly introduced election laws which do not favor the democracy and the Constitution.
Final question for you, sir. What do you think?
That is my
what would be your advice
so
for...
I think it was ill-advised for him and NASA to pull out of the elections, bearing in mind that last time they had more than 6 million people who supported them. Where do they want these people to go? And which means do they want to use to stop the 26th elections? Because already the economy is being hurt. People who, most of Kenyans, do piecemeal jobs, casual jobs, temporary jobs, jobs that they earn salary, some on daily basis or weekly basis. Now, if as we are starting to demonstrate as from tomorrow for a full week, This means some of these guys with their children, they will go hunger. That is why we are saying as much as we fight for a bigger picture of making sure Kenya is credible in its democracy and in the way it conducts its affairs and elections and so on, we must also be considerate of the majority of the people that we lead. How are they going to survive when all of us, we live in demos? Two, I have said, police are trying to use excessive force by gunning down young men and women who are innocent, who are exercising their constitutional right by demonstrating. What the police officers in Kenya are supposed to do is to guard them and to guide them. This is something which is in the Constitution, but not to use live bullets to people who cannot be able to defend themselves.
All right.
This might end some of all these guys to Hague again.
All right, thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Secretary General. That is Francis Atwoli, Secretary General of the Central Organization for Trade Unions, with his perspectives on the current political situation in the country, giving his perspectives live from Kisumu. Gentlemen, if you can react to what the SG said, picking up from where the points you kept on hold. Let me start with you, Mheshimiwa, then...
Mr. Atwoli is a very respected elder, and I really support what's done with the workers' union. But on that point, I disagree with him. When you have been bruised in an balanced play field, you cannot just go back there to play again with the referee who is not independent. That is the stand we have taken. He has mentioned some other things which I agree with. The police brutality. Today, this is kind of ridiculous when we fight Al-Shabaab in Somalia, and on our streets has become battlefield with police. In Siaya, Bondo, somebody was shot right on the head. A pregnant mother beaten, and a child 6 months was just killed. We are in a trying moment, and our stand as NASA is just not to go along, but to make sure that Kenya is a place where election can be done freely and credible. And remember, this struggle did not start here. We struggled with multi-party, we brought it. We struggled with constitution, we brought it. This is now about election, credible election. That is what we need for everyone in Kenya.
Now, maybe I can go back a little to what Mheshimiwa said before the break.
So you want to go back?
Yeah, it's very disheartening because he say we as NASA, we are not going for election. Yeah. So when I say we in Jubilee, say Jubilee, the tone you're talking to, it's like he's censuring me, number one. Number two, NASA should stop their holier-than-thou attitude, that they are the custodian of the Constitution, that so-and-so is a reformer when he's with them, he's a Molos in the other side. In 2007, Kalonzo was called watermelon, Wetangula was on the other side. This thing needs to stop, and we need to look at this soberly. What Atwoli is saying is that whoever advised Raila misadvised him, because that withdrawal was premature. And McHugh, if he has not signed the Form 24A, his name will be on the ballot. Trust you me. Just the same way, you cannot just write a letter to ABC and say, I'm a presidential candidate. There are some forms you're supposed to fill when you become... So you cannot say a letter is enough. Because when you're becoming a candidate, you did not just write a letter and say, I'm a presidential candidate. And as Disma say, once they acknowledge the letter you've sent, you automatically become a candidate. No. The same to withdrawal. Even when you look at the Supreme Court ruling, the main thing was the statutory documents, the Form 34As, Form 34Bs. It's the same applying to this withdrawal. Because Raila is a trickster in this sense. His name might be omitted on the ballot. Then he will go to the same court and say, I did not sign Form 24A. So IBC is being cautious and being guided by the Constitution and the law, together with the rulings of the court.
All right.
So it's in their right to do so.
You say it's a trickster?
But finally, I get an opportunity to speak. I want to begin from where Kavemba stopped, when he said that Kenya is a constitutional democracy, and inherent in his system that we respect the rule of law and order. The Supreme Court has indicated that you need to go back to an election, and this election must be done in strict compliance to the Constitution and relevant rules and regulations. Now, IBC was given these instructions several weeks back, but they have not demonstrated to the public that in fact they have identified those inconsistencies that led to the Supreme Court saying the election was not free, fair, nor credible. Now, expecting one of the players, Mr. Raila Odinga, to go back to that election, if the environment has not been sanitized, is expecting too much from Raila. Raila in his own, has got all the rights under the Constitution to say that I'm not going to participate in this election because what the Supreme Court identified as messy has not been sorted out. And the people have been crying right from the time the Supreme Court gave the judgment that Mr. Chebukati, please do a special audit. Reveal to the entire world these illegalities and irregularities and the interventions. One of the things that IBC has not done, they were told to open up the server. Now we're approaching another election, they've not yet opened the server. There are a number of people who misled the Supreme Court. For instance, Immaculate Kasait, is accused of perjury, of lying to the Supreme Court. Nothing has happened. So one wonders, why would any rational human being expect Mr. Raila Odinga to go back to the elections under the same environment that nothing has been done to sanitize the system? Now, what Mr. Atwoli makes a lot of sense about the withdrawal. But the tragedy we have in Kenya, people are supposed to be very active in ensuring that our democracy thrives. The private sector, most of the time they want to take sides. Because if the private sector, Mr. Atwoli and other guys were very proactive, these are the guys who are supposed to be breathing fire on the neck of IBC to tell them that you need to work out to clean the system. Unfortunately, the religious leaders in Kenya, private sector, including KEPSA, they come after the horse has bolted and they are making suggestions instead of being proactive. And you know, KEPSA the other day was saying that we're having so many demonstrations in town and it's costing business.
Right.
And on the same note, the Constitution says that you are allowed to picket, you are allowed to engage in demonstrations. So one wonders, why can the private sector in Kenya, religious sector, civil society come together to ensure that as a nation, we respect the rule of law and order? So when you have people saying that the demonstrations are becoming too much, they're going to interfere with business, that's a cost for democracy. And maybe in future, as Kenyans will know, that wherever the National Assembly or the Senate is coming up with a piece of legislation, we will now be proactive in looking at it to ensure that in future, if people need to go and engage in demonstrations, then it doesn't affect us negatively. And lastly, it's important now for Jubilee and Brand, because they've got a majority in the both houses, to come up with regulations on demonstrations. Let them set aside a piece of estate somewhere in Nairobi or all the CBDs when people want to demonstrate, where they can go and make noise and make sure that their grievances are heard in a manner that does not interfere or compromise other people's normal way of doing business.
All right.
Have been mentioned.
There's something that...
Just 30 seconds before we go on another break.
Fair on everybody.
Yes.
This must be saying that IBC has not done anything. Probably it has not done something to its satisfaction, but it has been doing stuff. One of the things that they've come out very clearly is about the role of the media in all this. They are actually now trying to get the media to have representatives in all the 290 constituencies so that the media can give the results live, even before waiting for the results to get to the tallying center. That will be very easy for Kenyans to compare whatever was given from the constituency, which was unlike the case before. I'm just pointing out one thing. So he probably is not very satisfied about that. Then I want to support what the Secretary General has said, and that has always been my position, that if there are issues that the NASA people are feeling are making these elections not conforming with the Constitution or with the directive of the court, they should be recording, taking note of those things. And we go for an election. And then if they are not satisfied with the outcome of the election or with the whole process, they can build their case. Why are they trying to get out of this? And yet, they petitioned, and for the first time in Africa, the court ruled in their favor. So why is it that they are doubting that the court... And actually, I am saying this because the court publicly threatened and stated that position, that in case this matter is brought back to us and the same things still remain there, we will not hesitate to again nullify. With that kind of assurance, what is the excuse of trying to now play games that are not within the acceptable constitutional framework.
Well said, Mutinda. Let's take a quick commercial break again on that note. We are talking about Raila Odinga being off the ballots. We'll talk about that next. We'll wind up that conversation. Let the gentleman here in studio have the last word. We'll also talk about the protest by NASA next week. Remember, NASA have promised they'll be holding the protest every single day. Now, of course, we're keeping an eye on that rally set to be held in Mombasa later today by NASA. Raila Odinga has landed in the coastal city of Mombasa to address that rally by the National Super Alliance at the Mama Ngina Drive grounds later this afternoon. Raila Odinga is currently, those are live pictures coming to you from the coastal city of Mombasa. Raila Odinga currently attending a church service before going out to address that rally among other NASA leaders, including his co-principals in NASA. We shall be keeping an eye on that. Francis Ntomwa is on top of that bit. Let's take a quick commercial break and come back with the final thoughts on these political issues. Don't go too far.